Our guest speakers this morning, because this is I Believe Sunday, are Mel Dwyer and Melissa Nussbaum. Mel is a new-ish member of our congregation, and Melissa has been with us for many years now. Yes. So it will be a wonderful contrast. We look forward to these I Believe Sundays very much because they give us a window into the fabric of our congregations and demonstrate to us the openness and freedom that you use, embrace, if you can ever embrace freedom. The prayer this morning is a poem by David White entitled Faith. I want to write about faith, about the way the moon rises over cold snow night after night, faithful even as it fades from fullness, slowly becoming that last curving and impossible sliver of light before the final darkness. But I have no faith myself. I refuse it, even the smallest entry. Let this, then, my small poem, like a new moon, slender and barely open, be the first prayer that opens me to faith. And our reading this morning is entitled The Founding of the Dedham Church, and it's from a series of lectures, Unitarian Universalist lectures from 2000 to 2001, and this particular one was written by Alice Blair Wesley. Alice Blair Wesley. And it's about the settlers of Dedham, Massachusetts. The settlers of Dedham came from different places in England and were unacquainted. This is the story of how they came to form a Unitarian church and the town of Dedham. By 1637, about 30 English families were newly settled in Dedham. They were not acquainted with one another prior to the founding of Dedham because they had come to New England on different ships from different parts of England and had lived for a while even in different towns. They first had to design a town government so they could legally allot fields for growing crops and smaller town lots for building houses. After they had built pens for their animals, planted initial crops, built houses, unpacked or pegged together furniture, and on, they began to think about founding a church. But they had been working so hard, they really hadn't had time to get to know each other very well. So they set up a series of weekly neighborhood meetings, quote, lovingly to discourse and consult together, to prepare for spiritual communion in a church society, that we might be further acquainted with the spiritual tempers and gifts of one another, unquote. Meetings were held every Thursday at several houses in rotation. Anybody in town who wanted was welcome to attend. The account in the Dedham Church record lists the questions the people in 1637, not yet a church, discussed at their weekly meetings, which continued for a whole year. They did not begin to talk about a church by talking about the Bible. By way of laying a basis for discussion of the church, they began by addressing a question of common sense or natural law. To quote, for the subject of these disputes or conference, diverse meetings, attend first, were spent about questions as pertain to the just, peaceable, and comfortable proceeding in the civil society. In a word, a foundational concern of a free church is for the justice, the peace, the laws, the conditions of the healthy, free society. Here in the wilderness, those people, having just come from the anguish of European society in the 1600s, knew there could be no peaceably functioning free church in the long term if it was not set within a larger society wherein the concerns for justice, peace, reasonable laws can be freely and effectively voiced without suppression. So after much talk about civil society, they began to edge toward talk about a church. Their first question on this subject was, here we are, not presently members of any church. We don't know each other well religiously. Are we qualified to assemble together? Their answer, we are if, in the judgment of charity, we seem to be and think we are acting out of genuinely deep religious love. Next question. Well, if we can meet like this just as neighbors, isn't this enough? Maybe we don't need a church. Their answer, no, this is too casual. If we really want to live in the ways of our deepest love, then we must intentionally form a much deeper community of love. And besides, others in the larger society need the example of our love, which a free church will publicly show forth. They understood the role of the church as filling needs of both the members and the larger community. These lay people's central conclusion from all those weeks, a whole year of discussion, was this: members of their new free church should be joined in a covenant of religious loyalty to the spirit of love. And once members were joined in a covenant of their own writing and signing, the members' loyalty in the church should be only to the spirit of love, working in their own hearts and minds. No one, not the governor, not the general court, not even members of other similarly covenanted churches, would have any authority in the local free church. They're not sectarian loners. They thought they should, and they did, seek counsel from neighboring churches, yet they were very careful to make sure everybody understood that they would seek and consider counsel from others often, but accept rulings or commands contrary to their own experience of the Spirit, never. Then and now, and for as long as human history lasts, the integrity of the free church comes down to our loyalty to the spirit of love at work in the hearts and minds of the local members. The lay people who founded First Church Dedham in 1637 knew that and knew it clearly. And that is why they still say together, and many UU churches do, love is the doctrine of this church. And we say love is the spirit of this meeting house. Welcome to the pulpit this morning, Mary Ellen, known as Mel Dwyer, to tell us what she believes.
Good morning. Thank you for this opportunity to share with you my journey. Our narrative stories combine to create the weave of fibers that become our community, and I am so grateful to call this community my home. As a preschooler, I found myself frightened of what then felt the overwhelm of God, the dilemma of death and impermanence. I remember vividly telling God I hated him. Him was the pronoun of my Catholic upbringing. In panic, I ran from my bed to my father and poured out what I had said. Instead of judgment, I found comfort and solace as he reassured me that God was not to be feared and God loved me. As a lapsed Protestant, my dad did not outline any path that night, but his arms spoke that refuge was possible. I began my journey to divinity in a conscious way that night. I felt permission to grapple with the anxiety of being in form. Watching a newly purchased balloon at the town fair escape and float deep into the sky at age 7 punctuated the reality of loss, disappointment, and change in this world. My beloved Nana passing, and my favorite brother from Provincetown heading into the maelstrom of the Vietnam debacle embedded that reality in my heart. Watching my Nana pray and caress her rosary daily opened me up to the possibility of sublime peace. I hungered for that with all my being. Growing up with an alcoholic mother, I came to order my life in an adherence to structure and neatness to keep a semblance of control. I knew, though, that wasn't the real deal. That was just survival. At age 10, I picked up my brother's Boy Scout book, and on the cover was a picture of a Boy Scout carrying a Boy Scout book. It went on and forever. My eyes glued to the picture as my soul tumbled through those endless books. Without knowing about fractals and infinite regression, I sensed the immensity of the time-space illusion and the oneness of being. I felt fear, and I felt relief. My body relaxed, my mind let go, and my heart quickened. Something was very, very real and similar, as when, as an adult, I finally looked out over the rim of the Grand Canyon. I knew I was deeply connecting to an awesome, awe-filled reality. It was both personal and impersonal. I was both experiencing the water of reality as the drop, and the drop as a part of the ocean. As a young girl, my beloved cat died, viciously torn by the neighbor's dog, and I began to take in and see the suffering around me and beyond me in the world. Abuse, unkindness, violence, hunger, poverty, war. I struggled to find meaning as a teenager. I read all the feminist books in my high school, searching for me and for a framework to understand injustice and suffering. Summers at Girl Scout camp and nature gave my soul deep draughts of joy and peace. I was trying to ride the wave of dualism, peace and joy, and pain and suffering. I continued to feel anxiety in life, coupled with the desire to make a difference and find my place and purpose in the world. In my last year of high school, I began to practice transcendental meditation. I began to experience a place of vastness within myself that settled and grounded me. Recently, I read the words of Paul Budnitz, the founder of Budnitz Bicycles That Are Made to Last Forever, an interesting spiritual theme, and founder of Ello Company, a new anti-advertising social network that seeks to create a place to connect and create and celebrate life. When asked what led him to start meditating, for us we could say pray or do justice, he responded, quote, "The same discontent that everyone else has. There was this terror that life is meaningless, that we are exposed and vulnerable. I was looking for an escape from that sense of helplessness. If there were a meaning to life that could be named, people would have found it by now. If life was totally meaningless, that would have been discovered too." He said, "I live in Vermont, for us, Provincetown, Cape Cod, and today life feels completely full of meaning because it's so beautiful, the leaves changing and all that. On other days, things seem totally bleak. We have to deal with these two opposing things, and I am somewhere along the way to realizing that that's okay." End quote. At age 17, I had a spiritual experience with Christ. It was personal and sincere and propelled me through college, a master's degree in social work, into a life of relief and development work in the Philippines. I married a man, raised 3 beautiful children, and was privileged to journey in life with people who were living on the streets in Manila, women prostituted in a web of sex trafficking and pain, children waiting for domestic and international adoptions, and finally with children and families living with AIDS. I have a heart full of stories of people living courageously and resiliently amidst great challenges. Within months of returning to the United States at age 36, my son became diabetic, and my oldest daughter began showing symptoms of a bipolar disorder. Years of hospitalizations ensued for her, and I returned to struggling to find truth and meaning. I embarked on a life-changing journey with a spiritual director who encouraged and supported all my spiritual exploring and hunger. I began what has now become a 15-year path of yoga. I entered a 5-year spiritual community dedicated to healing through the Kabbalistic tree of life. And I ended my marriage, finally wholeheartedly embracing my sexual orientation and finding a deep and abiding love that I had always hoped for and finally manifested with my wife, Allison. We live quietly in our beloved cottage and home among the dunes and live as one modern gospel translates the unforced rhythms of grace. I now live and experience life in a non-dual way, relishing the coming together of opposites in a paradoxical whole. I embrace life and suffering, knowing, as the Buddhists say, there is a noble path of right living to walk. Buddhists say, for me, that path of right living is to follow love. Big love, small love, all love. I believe we are always one with Source. Non-dual splitting is only seeing a part. As the hologram teaches, each part contains the whole. I seek to live compassionately and to love unbearably. As the 17th century Karmpa Ogyan Trinley Dorje posits, he speaks about loving unbearably, and when I read that, my heart broke open. I think that's an amazing place to be. In an article about creating community, Rod Speensberry looks at the Brooklyn Zen Center in their urban struggle to connect and create diversity and concludes, quote, "Our liberation is completely entwined with everyone else's liberation. Everybody needs to be in the room for all of us to wake up together. It's about waking up together," end quote. In closing, I come to this meeting house because all of me gets to show up and be accepted. And I come to this meeting house because all of you gets to show up and be accepted. We get to wake up together to ourselves. And this is indeed breathtaking. Thank you.
And we say, all of us love all of you. And now we will hear Melissa Nussbaum and what she believes.
Good morning. I was raised an atheist. My father was a communist, and that makes me a red diaper baby. In my innocent yearnings for connection and the mystical, I asked my father if, since we didn't believe in God, would it be okay if I believed in Pippi Longstocking? In his far-reaching wisdom, my father said yes, it would be okay. For those of you who are not familiar with Swedish author Astrid Lindgren's 9-year-old Pippi Longstocking, a brief introduction. Pippi is friendly, kind, naughty, unconventional, assertive, and has superhuman strength, able to lift her horse one-handedly. She is playful, unpredictable, lives by herself in a big house with her horse and Mr. Nelson, her monkey, and manages with a treasure trove of gold coins. She frequently makes fun of unreasonable adult attitudes. Her behavior is highly exasperating to many adults. She is not at all violent. Pippi's anger is reserved for the most extreme cases. such as when a man ill-treats her horse, or when she neutralizes 5 large bullies single-handedly. I suffered bullying. I'll skip those details. Pippi was my heroine. Pippi is trustworthy and loyal to her friends, Anika and Tommy. Pippi's father was a captain lost at sea. Due to leading a life at sea, Pippi received very limited conventional education. But she can cook for herself, clean and repair her house, care for her pets, and otherwise manage her affairs despite her illiteracy and lack of mathematical knowledge. Pippi was my first feminist model. As recently as mid-1990s, a Swedish social commentator argued that the Pippi cult had had a highly detrimental effect on both school children and preschool children in Sweden. Pippi worship has turned everything upside down in schools and family life and in terms of normal behavior, the commentator wrote in a leading Swedish daily. I was a believer. Pippi always had the best ideas of what to do. She took Tommy and Anika on thing-finding expeditions. Everything lying on the ground is fair game. A rusty can and an empty spool could be prize things to find. I still get a kick out of finding beauty in seemingly useless things. That pleasure of finding things includes the finding of ideas. I am a note taker. I take notes at all the usual places: talks, classes, workshops, teachings. Over the many years of studying Bon Buddhism, I have filled shelves with my notebooks. I often randomly turn to one of these notebooks for a kind of guidance from a trusted oracle. I also take notes in museums, on the train, bus, airplane, in the movies, on the phone. Any conversation is fair game. Looking out the window, watching TV, rehearsals, and of course, reading fiction and nonfiction. There is always something, a word, a phrase, an idea that I know I will want to turn to someday for inspiration, for writing or acting on the stage or in the world. UU sermons as source are no exception. The order of service, like that of today, generously supplied to us each Sunday, provides the perfect notepad. All I have to do is remember a pen or grab a pencil from the choir. I had orders of service piled up since the winter of 2011 when I began coming to the UU. I always intend to reread my notes and cull my findings. 3 weeks ago, before I was asked to speak today, in an earnest effort to lessen the piles of findings that can clutter my life, I reduced my notes to one file of findings. Here is an incomplete best of wisdom findings from UU sermons from 2011 to 2015. In random order that represents pretty well what I believe in and or what I wish to be. Credit and thanks go to Reverend Dave Johnson, Reverend Bill Clark, Reverend Christy Hardwick, and Reverend Kate Wilkinson. I have 5 categories, and the titles are mine, as are most of the titles of the sermons, but any of the mistakes in the quotes are mine. On September 22nd, the first category is uncommon common sense for being in right relationship. On September 22nd, 2013, in the sermon, Am I That Which I Long For? I scribbled down, get your bloated nothingness out of the way of the divine circuit. That's from Emerson. On October 27th, 2013, point yourself towards forgiveness and compassion. I scribbled, "You will not be punished for your anger. You will be punished by your anger." And let go of the death grip on your bad experiences. Move on, move forward. In a sermon about time on August 26, 2012, holding on to a grudge is like drinking poison and waiting for the other to die. On September 21st, 2014, you learn by living. What is the most generous response I can have to this situation? And on August 3rd, 2014, and the power of words, the three sieves. Is it true? Is it kind? Will it help? And I'm glad to have a button for that one. My second category is guidelines for navigating the sea or my life. On November 18th, 2012, on a sermon about risk, risk-taking is nourishment for the soul, and one does not discover new lands without losing sight of the shore for a very long time. In a sermon called Listening, June 24th, 2012, life is like sailing. It requires a lot of tacking. Zigzagging is not to deny our destiny. And to get your bearings, do nothing but listen. In a sermon called Quirky Alones, May 19th, 2013, anyone, anything that does not bring you alive is too small for you. And the last of this category, on September 21st, 2014, you learn by living. Some knowledge of yourself teaches you to cast out fear and is expressed in the choices you make. My third category is about hope, help, and doing. In a sermon called Helpers on January 13th, 2013, Mr. Rogers' mother said, "Look for the helpers." And a sermon to be counted among the hopers and the doers. On May 4th, 2014, No Place for Hate, I wrote down, "I will not refuse to do the something I can do." On May 11th, 2014, and we are not bound to succeed, but we are bound to live up to the light we have, quoting Abe Lincoln. And on May 23rd, 2014, Spirit of Life, we shall hew out of the mountains of despair a stone of hope, by Martin Luther King Jr. And finally, Heart, on July 15th, 2012, an uncommitted life is a life not worth living. My fourth category is to be welcomed as you are, or why be a you? On October 14th, 2012, I wrote the support of kindred spirits, of kindred seekers. April 7th, 2012, about grace, to fall apart in front of company. And a sermon on a conviction of spirit, the permission to be silly, crazy, sing, dance, the tenderness of small joys. And finally, unfaithful response on August 10th, 2014, talking about faith, pantheism. God is the web of the interconnectedness. My last category is joy. November 27th, 2011, for nothing in particular, for everything. On July 10th, 2011, talking about the Civil War, and about being Jewish, you are responsible for the joy you miss. And the last of this last category on helpers, on January 13th, 2013, a Talmudic teaching, the wedding takes precedence over the funeral. I have left out many deserving findings. They're stored in my computer. The orders of service have been recycled, something else I believe in. To my new pile of orders of service is this one. It's really a keepsake from January 18th of this year, from a special service held at the North Shore UU Church in Danvers, Massachusetts. As a member of the History Alive company, we performed Cry Innocent, The People versus Bridget Bishop. Danvers is where the notorious witch trials of 1692 began. Danvers in 1692 was actually Salem Village. It wasn't Danvers. Bridget Bishop, a feisty, unconventional woman, was the first of 19 innocent people to be tried and hanged for witchcraft. As part of the show, we invite the audience to be the jury, to listen, and finally to vote as if they were the jury of 1692 at Bishop's pretrial. The North Shore UU congregants were an extremely attentive audience, and not surprisingly, overwhelmingly found me, Bridget Bishop that is, innocent. They were UUs who would not tolerate such blatant injustice and persecution and did not want to even pretend to convict an innocent woman. They were, after all, earnest Unitarian Universalists, who otherwise are quite playful but take the business of justice to heart. They know that justice is, as Cornel West says, what love looks like in public. And they are UUs, after all, my people. Deep inside, I am still a Pippi worshiper. Ultimately, I am guided by trying to do the next right thing, whatever that is. Sometimes I have to just listen. Sometimes I have to go find it. "What are we going to do now?" asked Tommy. "I don't know what you are going to do," said Pippi, "but I know I can't lie around and be lazy. I am a thing finder. And when you're a thing finder, you don't have a minute to spare." Thank you.